Hello, I'm Sarah Davis and I lead the team here at Integrated Treatment Services. Today we're going to talk about fidget boxes. So fidget boxes are typically introduced as an occupational therapy approach, but when you're working as a multidisciplinary team, whether you're in a school setting, a care setting, or if you're a family at home, fidget boxes can be used for lots of different reasons, whether you're working within speech and language therapy, if you're working within the classroom, or as I say, just at home with your kids. So the idea of fidget boxes is to fulfil a sensory need that a child has. So what we need to do is we need to be thinking about having a tin, having a box, whatever you think would be appropriate for them, and we put in lots of different items that are going to be sensory stimulating. So the things that we need to consider when we first develop a fidget box is we need to make sure that there is something in it that motivates every member. So if you're in school, you need to make sure that there is something that's going to motivate each child within that group that you're working with, or each child within the classroom. Okay, so that involves making sure that there is something that is going to stimulate based on sight. So for some children, they're very visually motivated. So they like things like flashing light type equipment, or maybe watching a windmill go round. Perhaps something that moves and flashes very quickly. The other thing that we need to do is ensure that there is something that's sound making in there. So we all know there's typically annoying kind of activities and toys that make all sorts of sounds, but something that is sound based as well can be really useful for some children that are particularly motivated by sound. The next thing we need to do is make sure that in our fidget box there is something that's based on feel and touch. So that might be different kinds of fabrics, it might be something that's really particularly hard, like a really hard ball to squeeze, or it might be more like a stress ball type texture that the child can really sort of get some sensory feedback from in terms of sort of playing around with that. The other thing that you might want to consider to go in the fidget box is something based on taste. And I know this is going to be a big sort of controversial subject. Do you have anything that the children, say for example in a school group, can eat during the activity that you're running? From our point of view, we would say yes. I think it's really important. Lots of children get lots of sensory sort of stimulation or calming by actually having sort of deep, firm pressure in the mouth, particularly with the jaw. So if you've got really chewy sweets that are really hard to chew, biting into an apple, for example, that's another really great sensory feedback for the mouth. Another thing is things like twiglets or really crunchy crisps. So believe it or not, these snacks do fulfill a sensory function, and it is quite important that we can use those kind of snacks and make sure that they are something that's in the fidget box. They're not just something that you're providing sort of as and when, and really highlighting what the sensory function is. So is that giving the jaw really deep, firm pressure that's helping the system to calm? The final thing that we might consider to go in the fidget box is something based on smell. So this is just an area you need to be a little bit careful. Obviously, if you have any students that maybe have epilepsy, really important you don't use certain scents like lavender. But generally, if you know that you've checked these things are safe, you could use, there's like sensory smell boxes, so you can get a box that smells like a fresh cut grass, or maybe of the sea, lots of just sort of really high sensory things or low sensory things. So some that's a really strong flavour, or something that's not so strong, quite mild, but actually it's something that somebody might think, oh, I really like the smell of this. So the idea of a fidget box is to really tune into all the different senses. And what we find is that if children are either sensory overstimulated or sensory understimulated, they either need to have some sensory fidgets that's going to bring their levels back down, which is going to help them to be able to focus on the work that you're trying to do, or if they're really sort of quite relaxed and a bit sort of placid, to really bring their sensory systems up. Okay, so that's when you might be starting to use things like high flavours, or you might be using things like really hard sort of textures, something that's really going to sort of start to get their sensory system alive and awake. Okay, really important. Often teachers will say to me, if I'm using a sensory fidget box, the kids just think that they can sort of pick the toys out as and when they want. They're just toys. They're not listening to what I'm doing. How can I control that? I don't think it's going to work for me. It's such a common story, and I promise you, this works really, really well. We use it in all of our group therapy. I've used it within school situations and really sort of helped to facilitate a classroom curriculum-based activity where the children children are sort of helped to focus and helped to pay attention. So what is really important is that the students take ownership of this fidget box. When you introduce it, you need to introduce it as a project. Okay, so you need to make sure that they understand exactly what this fidget box is about. It's not just about playing with these toys anytime that they fancy it. It's about set times that you're going to say when they're actually allowed this fidget break. Okay, so we call it a fidget break, basically. So developing the group rules is really important, and I do this at the beginning of introducing any kind of fidget box. So we all get together around a table, we all think about what are the sensible rules that we need to have to make this fidget box work. Otherwise, we won't be able to use it in this session. So things that you might consider is, group rules, only using during the fidget break. Obviously makes sense. Be sensible with the fidgets. When you're putting together these group rules, always focus on the things that you want them to be doing and not the things that you don't want them to be doing. So don't put here, don't be silly with the fidgets, because they hear the word silly and that's what it implies that they need to do. So for children with language and communication difficulties, negatives, don't, won't, can't, shan't, don't do that, are a really difficult concept for them to understand. So it's always better to tell them what you want them to do and not what you don't want them to do. So focus on the behaviour that you want to see. So being sensible with fidgets is one of our group rules. Thinking about what your body needs. So I'd be saying to the children, when you're picking these fidgets, you need to think, what's your body telling you? Is it telling you that it needs to be really, looking at something that's very bright and moving? Is it needing to hear something? So do you need particular music, or do you want to hear that maraca or something like that that really sort of tunes into your hearing? Is it something that you need to do that's movement? So do you need to be physical and have more of a movement break? So would you be squeezing against a ball? Would you be stretching like one of the slinkies? So what kind of things do you need to be doing? Do you actually need something sort of in the jaw? So many of us sit there like this, or like this, or we sort of push the pen in our mouth, those kind of things, and we're giving our system sensory feedback. So things like chewy tubes can be a really good idea to having the fidget box. Obviously, they're going to be something that a child needs their own, so they'd have to identify it by colour, but they could all go in the fidget box, and that's going to give them a level of deep firm pressure back in their jaw to be able to help them to sensory calm and then to be able to focus again. Okay, so one of the final things is, if you're concerned about a child that you feel they're really seeking out a lot of sensory stimulation, or that they just seem to be so sensory low, so sort of lethargic and quite hard to rouse, then you really do need to be looking at referring to an occupational therapist. What an occupational therapist would do is carry out what we call a sensory profile. And what they will do is they will assess the sight, sound, feel, taste, smell, touch. They will be able to sort of have a look at what's the student's sensory seeking out and what are they avoiding. So what's helping them during their day and what's not so conducive to them being able to sort of be ready to learn. So do make sure that if you are concerned, speak to other team professionals that are involved. Your speech and language therapist will be able to say to you whether they feel they've noticed some of these behaviours. Obviously speaking to parents, if you are a parent and you're noticing things like, that your child is doing a lot of tiptoe walking, or they seem to be permanently chewing, maybe putting their sleeve in their mouth, it's always wet, that they seem to be sort of needing stimulation, like light fluttering things, or they play noises, they play the TV particularly loud, or they like that sort of real cause and effect type immediate sound and sort of pictorial things in front of them, and then it goes and it comes back on again. So if you're noticing those kind of things within a child that you work with or your child at home, then obviously do raise the awareness to other professionals that are involved, and we can, usually as a team, start to have a look at sort of what sensory stimulation is a child seeking out and what are they avoiding, and is it fulfilling a positive need, or is it actually quite sort of difficult for them to be able to focus their learning? So what do we need to include as part of their day? Okay, so other ideas that lead on from this, and we'll make further videos on it, looking at sensory circuits. So sensory circuits are a much more sort of larger physical break. You might be having sort of big physical activities like carrying something really heavy, like hanging on the climbing frame, like bouncing a ball really hard or bouncing on a big therapy ball. So you're using big fidget breaks to sort of give the sensory system exactly what it's seeking. All of these things really do help the child to focus. So although it may feel like you're actually diverting the attention away from the activity that you want to do, it absolutely will help the child focus on the activity that you want to do. So you must make sure that you use sensory snacks consistently throughout an activity or throughout a day. If an activity was an hour long, I'd suggest maybe using sort of 2 to 3 sensory snacks throughout that activity. If you're having a whole school day, I would suggest that between curriculum sort of subjects and within them, you consider using sensory snacks. So develop it for your whole classroom, have some fun, let us know what you find really works for your students or your child at home, and we'll present you lots more ideas. Do have a look at some of the websites. Special Direct, so www.specialdirect.com is a really useful website for finding sensory fidgets on there. Obviously have a look at our own website, www.integratedtreatments.co.uk. Thanks for listening.